you will never find a team that has the same analytics department and how they're integrated into each team across the board. And that to me was super interesting, getting to talk to those people, hearing how they integrate, hearing their wins, hearing their pitfalls. I think that was something that we'll try and integrate more into the broadcast next year, of talking about how a team gets their analytics department integrated into what they're trying to do. We see advantages on the field, but there's a lot of stuff that takes place before you get on the field that can help the team have an advantage.
Hey everybody, Kevin Cole here, your host for Unexpected Points. If you're a first-time listener here, I hope you're going to enjoy what you have to hear. My guest today is Sam Schwartzstein. He is the analytics guy, the numbers dude for the Amazon TNF Prime broadcast. If you watched the Analytics Prime Vision feed that they have there with the all 22 with his different stats there. They also had little interview snippets with him between the first and third quarters where he's talking about some things that went on in the game. And of course, tweeting out a bunch of information there. He's going to be here on the show. He's also a former football guy, and we talk a little bit about his football past here, former offensive lineman for Stanford back in the Andrew Luck era, and just a really good dude. I had a chance to meet him in person for the first time at the Boston Sloan Sports Analytics Conference, actually outside of it. Last year, we talked a little behind the curtain sort of stuff here, but we talked a bit about him coming in and being a co-host for this podcast when I was thinking about that idea last year. He, of course, got this gig with Amazon, so that didn't end up happening, but I always want to have him back as much as possible so we can discuss everything that's going on. We talk about how the broadcast went this last year. We have some funny anecdotes about Al Michaels in that too that I think you guys will enjoy. And we also talk about the Super Bowl that's going to happen from a team building perspective, how those teams should be looking at things going forward, and especially how the Bengals and Bills and also the 49ers now coming off of some losses, being some of the elite teams in the NFL, how they should be looking at the offseason. So getting into draft and positional value talk and all of that stuff. If you have any questions for me, you can find me on Twitter at Kevin Cole _, or you can email me unexpected points. That's pts@gmail.com. Otherwise, here is Sam Schwartzstein. All right, Sam, thank you for joining me. We made it through the regular season. We made it through most of the playoffs at this point. So I wanted to have you on because I was thinking of people who I need like a high level of analytical expertise, a high level of football expertise. And for anyone watching on YouTube right now, Sam, literal football guy. He's got a number of footballs in the background. Wait, let's just talk about this straight up right now, because that's a lot of football. So explain the footballs. Explain yourself to the nerds, please.
Yeah. So fellow nerds. I played football at Stanford, which makes me about king nerd of all the football nerds you could be.
Yes.
So that's my Stanford football. And then there's NFL football, the Duke football. And then the XFL football, original XFL football. So that's the football I learned how to snap with, played center in college. And then these footballs over here are the footballs I designed that we played with in games at the XFL. So one of my jobs while starting the XFL was coming up with our football, one that was cool enough to be past Vince's smell test, but also could be used in game and not hurt game. So I did a whole product development process. That one is the first ball we ever used in a test game that was approved, and then there was the team-specific Guardians ball.
Okay, we don't need to get into too much of that one because, like, the podcast people are like, "What the fuck are you guys talking about?" But
then these balls down here,
oh my god, we got more balls.
Sorry, these balls down here are very interesting because these could never be used in game. Vince wanted them to be the actions.
They're kind of darker. I see a green ball, a black ball,
all the team colors.
Black ball, all the
could
team
never
colors.
Be used.
Okay.
Can never be used.
Yeah, that would be confusing. Imagine Jamar Chase was having problems with the stripes no longer being on there. Boy, he'd just be dropping balls left and right there. But no, one more ball though. I did notice to your right there was a ball still wrapped up. So what is that? Is that like the collector's item ball? Is that the NFT of balls?
It is the NFT of balls. So that's exactly right. But This ball, when we announced the ball, we announced it Thanksgiving week. And so we wrapped it up like a turkey, and we sent it to a bunch of people, a bunch of press people, and I took one of them.
You know what you should do with that is have it like, John Madden used to have the turducken. So you could have like a ball inside of a ball inside of a ball that you could slowly slice open for Thanksgiving. So
I think at one point I probably tested that. I probably tested the turducken football at one point. There was a lot of testing going on.
Product development is a passion of mine. Okay, so I want to have you on to talk all that stuff. Another reason I want to have you on is I've been just waiting for another opportunity to use more sound drops that I have from 1987 cult classic Mel Brooks's Spaceballs. I also wanted that.
Wow. Liquid Schwartz.
So I need more of that to have on too. So I appreciate that also coming in. And third is you were the analytics, what do you call it? Like the analytics hunk. Expert. You were the analytics hunk, I think, of the broadcast there. Not only getting into the broadcast later on as we progressed through the season, they just couldn't keep you off of the screen. The magnetic force could not keep you off the screen, but also tweets, putting all that together. We had an episode earlier. We described everything there. So we got all this wrapped up together. So you're checking all the boxes. Let's start first with your experience in this 2022 season. Amazon, brand new, Amazon Prime coming into the space, streaming only, brand new, multiple feeds, all brand new. What can you tell me about the whole experience and how it went?
Yeah, it went awesome. The goal of this year was to focus on putting out a great product and just being great, and then being able to adapt to what fans, customers had seen and make it so that we are building something for them. So what I had done, I joined, and then we just had kind of like a sandbox of what you saw in Prime Vision of different things that we were trying to figure out what worked, what didn't work, all these different components. And then we just adapted week by week. And that's why it grew till we saw we needed someone to come on and explain some analytics, or how are we directing people to watch the game in a unique way versus just saying, here's a smorgasbord sandbox. Let's give directional focus on what we're trying to watch. If we're going to talk time to throw, then after that, we'll have time to throw above the quarterback's head. Things that make it more tied in together and not just make it like, hey, a cacophony of different things that are taking place. And it was awesome to see the growth of the product, see how much people loved it, and see the retention that we had for people who were really passionate about the product. They stayed, and they became one of the lines we heard is, we can't watch football any other way, because they started watching Prime Vision. That is how they want it on all their broadcasts, and that's a win for us.
Yeah. We've nerds, we try to ruin football just generally. So you're trying to ruin people's football viewing experience, basically, outside of this broadcast.
Yeah, I think that's one way to put it. I think I think what honestly though is like anything that we do, everyone else can see, and I think it's going to make the game better to watch, because we're gonna willing to try new things, put ourselves out there, and then adapt.
Yeah, no, it was fantastic. Now, actually, maybe you could clarify something for me, because I was watching the Prime Vision, the extra stats, the tracking, the all 22. I was watching that most time. So you started jumping on there. I don't know what week it was, around week 10, 12, something like that. You started getting in the action. And were you on the normal broadcast too, or was it just on that broadcast?
Just on Prime Vision. So what we wanted to go deeper with our fans that we were super serving. So the hardcore fans that are enjoying all 22, they're enjoying the analytics, they wanted more. And then I would provide directional focusing on what is something that from a tracking metric you can see, to an analytic about defining it differently. So we're going to talk the first week on there was Seahawks, Niners, and here's how to watch Christian McCaffrey differently. He's going to be in and out of the back. He's going to be out of the backfield more and in motion more than any other running back. So then now you see that he's in motion more, he's in backfield more. We have the nameplate on his head, and you'll be able to see on the side wing, oh, here's all the analytics about when he's on the out of backfield versus in the backfield. And so then it gives you a landing spot to say, okay, here's you explaining the stat. And then we use success rate a lot this year, because that was something, as we talk to fans, that was easier to digest than maybe an EPA metric or a CPOE metric. That makes it a little bit more difficult for people to, who's expecting what. Everyone can see, oh, did you stay on schedule? We're defining something that people already say with analytics, and that was helpful to get fans, but we still need to explain or on screen myself to come in there and explain it to make sure that now fans are getting something that they really want, and they're following the game in a little bit different way. And ultimately what we asked other people that were polling is, did this make you a smarter football fan? And 99% of them said yes.
Yeah, no, it definitely. I mean, even for me, someone who I'm not very smart on the film stuff. I try not to watch film as much as I can. But for even the stat stuff, it was helpful for me. Yeah, I like success rate also because I think it's a good metric where its benefits in terms of stability are probably a little bit overstated. But if you're watching a game and one team is up, 21-7, but their success rates are basically equal on offense, you can probably say it's a closer game as far as, fundamentally how these teams are playing versus what you're seeing on the scoreboard. Of course, you're going to get some people are going to be like, oh, big plays matter, turnovers matter, this matters, that matters. And of course it does, but it does help give just an extra layer of understanding, which I think sometimes we forget about when we're watching the broadcast, where we're just saying this is what happened and this is what the teams deserve the score to be.
And that's a great point. And what made it interesting, so I did what we call pod busters. So I'd come in between the first and second quarter and the third and fourth quarter. And the last
you
game
got
of the
lingo.
season,
This is good lingo that I'm going to use now. Go ahead.
But when we came in the Dallas game, we saw that Dak Prescott had the #1 success rate in the NFL. And then we're seeing that part of that problem was everyone catches his footballs. He doesn't have many incompletes because he'll throw a lot of interceptions.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but I had the opportunity to come in and clarify why his success rate was still high, but the score was closer than expected because he had thrown 2 interceptions.
Yeah.
In that third and fourth quarter. So, I'm not saying analytics is going to be the end all save all and things, but I can help explain. We use this metric, success metric, but incompletions and interceptions are counted the same in this metric. So as we're teaching you the pitfalls of all the different metrics that you'll see. Right? Everything has a downside to it. Just like, if you're rushing the ball well, if you're a great rushing team, maybe film people don't do this. If you're down in a game and you can't lean on the rush, it doesn't help you anymore. Right. And so, we're going to be focused on giving our customers, our fans, more information about how to arm themselves and how they're going to talk about football, right? Whether it's the positive and negative. We're going to always show balance. We don't have to just be throwing at everything in their face. This is great. This is great.
Yeah. I mean, like even the interception talk, right? If you throw 2 interceptions in the first half, probably you're going to have at least like a 10% INT rate. And let's face it, even if you're the worst quarterback in the NFL, you're maybe hitting 4 or 5% or something like that over a very limited period of time. So yeah, it's good context to have. Now, the other thing I'm sure that you got from this experience is close, personal, lasting, lifelong friendships with Al, Kirk, Kaylee, also Taylor, everyone there. So you guys have any summering plans, I'm assuming?
No, I typically summer in the Hamptons. There's going to be 3 people that like when I say that, but yes, I summer in the Hamptons. So if they're there, they'll be
part of the Stanford elite. Is there like a group of Stanford elite that have a special place, a special East Coast bunker in the Hamptons also?
I'm not at liberty to say.
Okay, we'll let that go. What I have to ask you one thing about Al though, and you can let this go if you need to. But I heard an interesting factoid about Al Michaels from a person who claims to be in a position to know, is that he's never eaten a fruit or vegetable before in his life. Can you confirm or disconfirm that?
I can absolutely confirm that. I've seen.
You can't confirm it. So you've never witnessed him eating a fruit or vegetable before.
No, and it's often a topic of conversation. Yeah,
oh, really?
He talks about it in his book too.
He does. Okay, this is public information. I didn't even get it. Someone told me that, and I was like, it's funny because I actually knew someone before who was in a similar boat, and I guess you could survive without it. So what the hell? All right, so he does talk about it then.
He's doing pretty well with it. Yeah.
Okay. So that's good. We can put that to bed. I won't have to wonder, stay up late at night wondering or not if Al Michaels does. What about like a French fry or something like that? Like he'll eat that, right?
I don't know if I saw him eat that. I think I'll say this: after the Cincinnati game, he came up to me. I think it was the first time since in 2 weeks we had spoken directly, and it was like, "Where's the pizza?" So I think tomato might be a vegetable, but I think he still eats pizza.
Yeah, so it's almost like my kids when they say they don't want to eat vegetables, but there's certain carve outs. There's certain carve outs always that go along with that. So okay, that's very, very good to know. I guess looking back, is there anything what did you feel was the most important thing that you learned during this season? And it could be small or big thing. It could be personal or about the broadcast generally.
I think for me, my biggest takeaway was one of the most fun parts of my job is I try and talk to everyone every team's analytics department. There's some that I do, some that I can't talk to. There's some I'm talking to beat reporters. And there's also just me doing investigative work on how this analytics department fits into each team.
Right.
And almost every team is different. And almost every team has unique ways in which they get analytics integrated into their team. One thing that you'll have is almost every team has an analytics person that helps with game planning. It's doing, replacing PFF work, which I'm just talking about charting data, replacing quality control work. So expediting the work that people would already be doing from a charting perspective or from just a data input perspective. Every team has that right now. But that's not new. That's expediting a process that had already been taking place. But every other team, you will never find a team that has the same analytics department and how they're integrated into each team across the board. And that to me was super interesting, getting to talk to those people, hearing how they're integrated, hearing their wins, hearing their pitfalls. I think that was something that we'll try and integrate more into the broadcast next year, of talking about how a team gets their analytics department integrated into what they're trying to do. Because I think it's an important understanding that, there are, we see advantages on the field, but there's a lot of stuff that takes place before you get on the field that can help the team have an advantage.
Yeah, definitely. Are you going to the combine this year?
I will be at the combine.
Okay, so you'll be at the combine. Good, because I want to make sure I want to meet up before like the big data bowl or something, and then I can just kind of like be in part of your crew, your posse, as the adoring fans start gathering around TV superstar Sam Schwartzstein. So I want to make sure we have that beforehand. Okay, anything combine you want to talk about?
Yeah, I'm really excited for the combine this year. I think there's a lot of analytics people I know that are meeting up there. It'll be an awesome time for people to kind of interact and kind of blend the two together, because that's where I have my little forte. Like you said, I have playing experience. I've built a football league on the business side, on the rules side, and then I have the analytics experience. And so being able to kind of blend that together, the combine's kind of the mixture of all of that. And so seeing a mixture of people and trying to connect people from the film side to analytics people, that's kind of my goal there, is to where people can then kind of brain meld and be like-minded and try and learn a lot of stuff there. And so I think the combine, there's some really intriguing prospects. There's guys playing at the Shrine Bowl right now that are really exciting, like Zay Flowers, that are going to move up the ranks, and you might see him run a 4.3 at the combine. So Eric Galco and his team at the Shrine Bowl, they've done a lot of great stuff, getting the best of the best people there.
Yeah. We got the Senior Bowl stuff going now. There's already clips out there. We're already confirming or backing up our takes immediately. Now, when you were coming out as a prospect, as a top prospect in the NFL draft, did you just like show up in Indianapolis with like a t-shirt and shorts on and just like try to break in to run, or no?
No, because I was busy nursing a hamstring injury that I then ended up pulling on ESPN3, because we signed a multi-year deal of ESPN3 broadcasting the Stanford.
Three will always do that to you. Yeah.
And,
not the Ocho.
The three got there, and so I pulled my hamstring there, and my football career pretty much ended there. I couldn't bench because I tore my pec. I couldn't run because I pulled my hamstring at yard 32. So
yeah,
could you
shuffle?
No. The anti-inflammatories would let me do it because it just was non-functional. But
okay.
I had enough anti-inflammatories in me where I could possibly shuffle. No.
Short or shuttle, I should say. Yeah, the short shuttle. It's all the rage now for identifying the offensive line prospects. So I should tape you. We should get you to run. We should get you to do your. What do you think about a viral engagement experience? We get you to do your combine drills at this year's combine.
If the price is right, I'll do pretty much anything.
I'll compete against you, so I'll put up 0 reps.
If I get to compete, then yeah.
Okay, I'll have 0 reps, and then I'll see somehow I'll make Tom Brady look like the fastest man on the planet, basically. So it'll be that'll be some good times. We'll think about that. All right, let's get into the football. So what's going on here? Playoffs, Super Bowl. I know we got a little bit of a break here until we get fully into the Super Bowl, but I would say we got the 2 best teams in the NFL, probably. The Bills might have been seen as being in that category, but they kind of disqualified themselves with that last performance against the Bengals. You have any overarching thoughts about the game or what we've seen from these two teams so far. Specifically, one point I want to bring up, and this is something where I played a little bit of the game on social media by sending out this thing about the Eagles having the weakest strength of schedule during the regular season and in the playoffs. They had 14th of 14 teams in the playoffs when you discount the fact that the 49ers didn't have a functioning quarterback. And they were 32nd, according to my numbers, during the regular season, too. So maybe I knew that was going to get picked up because all the NFC East teams' fan bases hate each other so much that you get three fan bases that are making something viral versus being positive about one of them. What do you think about the Eagles versus the Chiefs? Because I think the markets right now have the Chiefs being slightly better. I mean, the Eagles being slightly better. Do you have any opinions on that?
Yeah, I think one of the exercises I try and do is look at the rosters across the board and see where I would take another player from the other team, and
right.
You're going to find yourselves hard to find Chiefs players a lot versus when you're going on roster player to player.
And the Eagles have the complete roster. They have the complete roster, which is also why, which is counter to any sort of logic when it comes to Howie Roseman. You see them being mock draft running backs in the first round this year because that's like what they do for complete rosters. They're like, I don't know, with no needs, let's just give them a running back. So anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, and so that's like the first order of business. And then you see who has the coaching advantage, and then who is the health advantage, right? The health is going to be a big thing, and coaching advantage. I look at both of them having. Andy Reid's clearly a better coach, but Nick Sirianni is one of the best game planners. They have a unique game plan for every game, much like Andy Reid does. So I don't see there being a huge disadvantage there. I see the advantage being A.J. Brown most likely. Right? Who is the guy they're going to be able to lean on if this back spasm thing turns out to be a big thing where they can't stretch the field and Patrick Mahomes has to do magic again, which he had to do magic in the last win, right, against the Bengals. If he's obligated to do it again, which we saw he did in the Super Bowl loss to the Buccaneers, Jalen Hurts doesn't have to do that, right? He gets to be a great game manager, which he's one of the best that we've seen, right? It reminds me of a lot of early Dak Prescott, where he's just doing everything that he's asked to do. He's not making mistakes, and he ends up just, they end up being able to lean on their pass rush on the back if they get ahead. What was interesting to me was the Bengals got no pass rush against Patrick Mahomes, and so is this offensive line for the Kansas City Chiefs going to hold up against where we haven't seen a truly tested secondary because the pass rush has always gotten home for the Eagles, right? And so, like you said, if it's strength of schedule, if they just haven't. You ain't played nobody, Paul, right? Like that. If that's the scenario we have here for the Eagles, that could spell disaster if they have to then get into a boat race with somebody like Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the game management / fourth down decisionings angle is very important, and it is. Like coaching is a lot of stuff that goes into coaching. So maybe we think about it a bit too much because it's so in our face and we don't see a lot of behind the scenes stuff, which obviously Andy Reid is excellent at. He wouldn't have had this track record of success in Philadelphia and now Kansas City if that weren't the case. But I think sometimes people be a little bit surprised by how big of a difference some of these fourth down decisions can actually make. I mean, I'm looking at just in this last game against the 49ers. I mean, it was a blowout, right? But even still, the Eagles were 3 for 3 on their fourth down conversions. It results in about 7.8 expected points added. It resulted in about 15% win probability. If we talk about 15% win probability, if basically any player but the quarterback is out, you probably need to be missing like 3 elite non-quarterback players before you'd sniff a move in the markets that would be the equivalent of a 15% win probability that's going on here. So it really can make that big of a difference. And they are a really good short yardage team. And the Chiefs are not that great of a short yardage team. And Andy Reid doesn't lean into those things, in particular in situations where they don't feel like they need to go for it because they're not down by much any particular time. That's an interesting angle that we're going to see play out because I don't know if Reid has had to go against someone with this caliber of team that's this equal to them in the playoffs where there's this big of a potential mismatch in those types of situations.
Yeah.
And because Shanahan's a boomer, because Shanahan was a boomer when they played against them. So right. Like he had his chances and didn't go for it.
And they had 3rd and 9 a lot the Chiefs did and converted, right? And at that point in the season, they were converting 3rd and 9 at 58% and 39 plus. So like that was just over the top success. Well, and is that 3rd and 9, like, yes, the pass rush of the Niners is great, but like you then have to do that same 3rd and 9 against the Eagles. And then you're going to, if you want to get closer and be able to use 4th downs, and they struggled. And the issue is, they struggle with a kicker too, right? They're doing plus territory punts in the AFC Championship game, right? They got bailed out by that.
Yeah.
And you got to think about, okay, what are they going to have opportunities to make these in-game decisions? And I think in the Super Bowl, they'll be more likely to lean on Patrick Mahomes because it's like a burn the ship situation. But what's great about the Eagles is you go to the other side. A lot of teams that should go for it on 4th down, they're not as good at it, and they have a bad defense, right? Because often I believe the teams that should go for it more on 4th downs are the underdogs, because you're more than, you need to find something, a chink in the armor. You need to find some advantage. But the Eagles are giving it back to a great defense too, right? So if they're giving short fields, if they're giving those scenarios, they have the best 4th down mechanics. It's all those things combined. You're going to have a huge advantage. The problem is if 4th down might not matter to the Chiefs if they're going to get out of 3rd and 9s, right?
Yeah. No, definitely. Well, there's a couple different things that made me think of there, because like the Chiefs, you can't just apply across the board, I think, based upon distance, them being a good 3rd down conversion team or a 3rd round over expectation team. That would lend you to believe that they should be going for a lot more 4th downs. But I think the reality might be in 4th and 1, maybe even 4th and 2 situations, they're going to be better than your average team. But it's really what we're talking about, and this is what they really should be considering more often. And of course, this is, blow up the brains of a lot of the media pundit sphere, is like 4th and 5s, 4th and 6, 4th and 7s, 4th and 8s. Those are the ones where the Chiefs have a massive advantage versus the field. And even, Ben Baldwin's win probability, 4th down probability bot, doesn't encompass the specifics of the Chiefs in those situations. It just encompasses the fact that they're a favorite in the game and they can probably convert fairly well. But those are the ones that he really could be leaning on. And you do see him going for his 4th and 1 sometimes, but that's not even really where the Chiefs could be pressing their advantage.
Yeah, you're 100% right there. They don't have to play the same game, right? So a lot of the conversion probability that the Next Gen Stats Data Decision Guide uses off of is, consensus average. 4th and 1 is very simple for the it's 87% conversion rate, for the Eagles, up to sometimes 90%, but it calculates its decision based off of about 77%. So they're better than expected, but the model's like, you have to regress at some point, or the model doesn't see that they're doing the assisting the runner from behind play.
Right. That was so. I love just the shamelessness of putting 2 guys behind the quarterback and say we're going to have them both push the quarterback in on this one.
So what I like, to go a little bit football and make this about me. We ran a very similar play in college called 64 lead dive. One thing that I did, I moved the ball forward 1.5 yards. So, Jason Kelce get a lot of credit for it.
You're a sneaky one. You're like rotating it a few times and it happens to spin forward like a half a yard.
What I would do is I'd stand over the ball in my 4-point stance, and while the crowd and everyone's screaming, I would then, as I'm pointing, I would then move the ball forward, and I'd get into my 4-point stance with the ball. Yeah. So that's how I did it. I got 1 yard that way, and then DeCastro on my right, he would get the other yard for us. And so but what we used to do is we used to say, okay, we're gonna get rid of the defenders because we'd launch 2 fullbacks over the top. So what people don't realize,
you try to get rid of those guys who are jumping in to stop. Okay, yeah, I like that.
But gravity happened, so they all landed on top of me. Okay,
hey, sacrifice. That's a sacrifice for your team.
One of our fullbacks becomes the next guy. So we're doing the same type of thing. We're running a fake pitch off of it. We're doing an evolution because we get in the same, bone type formation, very similar to like how the Eagles are doing it. But then we put offensive linemen back there because they started putting defensive linemen. So now I'm doing the snap. They're having 2 defensive linemen jump over the top. I have 2 offensive linemen. I'm having like 1,000 pounds land on top of me every single time. And I like what they are doing with pushing instead of everyone landing on top of the center, because I would do my move and then I would just cradle.
Yeah. It still seems painful, even if you're getting pushed. I got a new. I'm okay. I'm gonna invent a new thing I just thought of right here. Mm-hmm. It's probably not legal. You have to tell me if it's legal or not. Can the center snap it to the quarterback, and then the quarterback between the legs just give it right back to the center, and then the center is the one picking up the 4th down? What do you think about that?
Well, I'd have to look at the NFL rulebook. I know high school and college rulebooks have the fumble rooski taken out of it, but that is technically the fumble
because
rooski.
it has to leave the hand of the center, right? That would be like
Yes.
you can't be touching it. It's like the quarterback can just touch it and then say, "Okay, now it's yours." So it has to leave the hands. But if it actually physically left the hands of the center and then was given back, it's probably not going to work. You probably get blown up in the meantime. But I'm trying to, I'm trying to disrupt. I'm trying to disrupt sneaks right here, and this is my idea.
So, this is why people think I'm annoying sometimes, but you're coming up with a nonsense thing. I'll define it for you. So the fumble rooski is a very similar concept, right? Where you're gonna get it. And why the fumble rooski in these types of plays where you give it back to an offensive lineman is so good is the defenders are taught to track the eligibles, right? There's the five eligibles on the team and plus the quarterback, right? So now you're tracking the eligibles. So when you give it to it's better as a misdirection play than just to stuff it up the middle play because that's where eyes are. And so Jason Kelce is the kind of guy you'd want to use because he's a fullback playing center.
Yeah.
And that's why he's so athletic. So if there's any time to do a fumble rooski, make it in the Super Bowl and then have to have like a 10-minute review process where everyone's trying to find fumble rooski rules in the NFL rulebook. And let's make everyone hopefully Dean Blandino gets to have to deal with that on air. My good friend Dean.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if the Eagles did it, but who was it? Jacksonville, who did like the everyone gets up like you're gonna do the sneak and then you just run a little end around sort of play. So yeah, I do appreciate the little bit of misdirection that can come into play there.
Yeah, and I think look, it's when Stanford we had a lot of shifts and motions, we do a lot of things, and then for the bowl game we had a play called montage, which is all of our shifts and motions in one play. We ended up getting it was like 6 shifts and motions in one play, and we end up getting the 2 yards, and then John Gruden goes off about how terrible of a coaching staff we have because we're so rude to the game. But it was fun for us, right? Some of my teammates don't agree, but I think football's fun. And so I believe that each team, because both these teams are fanatical game planners, they all have something special. Whether it was the single wing spin around play that the Chiefs had in the Niners Super Bowl, or it's going to be something with this 4th down scenario that they'll have something cooked up for the Eagles because it'll be a fun way for everyone to engage during the 2 weeks you have to prepare for the Super Bowl.
Yeah. Hopefully Mahomes is healthy enough so they can do that ring around huddle and then go forward.
I find it interesting that it was a high ankle sprain. High ankle sprain and lateral ankle sprains are very different. I've had both. One's non-functional, the high ankle sprain. So him being able to play, if it truly is a high ankle sprain, is an extreme marvel of what you do. It means there's no membrane between your tibia and your fibia, and so like the way your foot lifts up, like you can't actually push off of it. There's nothing. It's not like this is painful. There's nothing to push. So very incredible that he was able to play.
Well, I mean, I think I'm not even. This is only half joking. The analogy that people made for Mahomes, the funny one about him running is he looks like he's like holding a drink and trying not to spill it when he's running. But I also think maybe just the way he runs, he kind of runs like someone who already has an ankle sprain a little bit, even his normal running motion. So maybe that helps in a way.
Yeah, he's a scamper. He likes a scamper. He doesn't quite run, but that's like a scamper. He tiptoes through the tulips.
Yes, but it ends up getting it done. Okay, so let's talk about quarterback then, because that'll be important. You mentioned completeness, I would say that's true. You have guys like Chris Jones on defense who can really come out and wreck things potentially as a single man. You have Kelce and Mahomes on offense, where even though Dallas Goedert's a great player, he's not a Travis Kelce. So you have those sorts of advantages. So how much of an advantage is Mahomes in this sort of game, being that these two dudes are probably number 1 and number 2 in the MVP voting when it comes to quarterbacks? Because I believe they're 2 of the 3 finalists along with Justin Jefferson.
Yeah, I think the advantage is clearly Mahomes because in games where you have 2 weeks to prepare, the other team can have a great game plan for you defensively, right? And what's important is with the collarbone injury or the shoulder injury that Hurts has, can he create with his legs? Can he get his rushing yards, his scramble yards to account for what he might miss in the passing game, right? And if they're not playing a 3rd string quarterback or an XFL quarterback, they really can't do that or rely on just like their defense and short fields. So when everything hits the fan, you have to then lean on your quarterback, and Patrick Mahomes is the best to ever do it when it comes to being able to create and find ways to make the team exciting. Like I think the stat of like, they had 3 rookies on the defensive back end, and there was the 3 of his main receivers were out for this game, and he was still amazing. Like the worst analytic, or not worst, one of the worst cliches I hate is he throws a catchable ball. Right, but he makes me believe in it, right? Like all balls should be catchable. He makes me believe in it because I really don't know if you can just roll people out there versus I think you had some great stuff about the absence of Tyreek Hill, and like Eric Eager had some great stuff. Like it's not going to be that big of a deal, and like we saw how big of a deal the addition was for Tua. And how little it really mattered for Patrick Mahomes.
It is extraordinary. I think Eric was much more so, and if you follow Eric on Twitter, you got like 3 weeks worth of quote tweeting people, to victory marathon for him on the Tyreek Hill take. But here's what I'll say. So this is interesting. There was like piece that I forget his last name, Seth Kaiser, I believe, who has a Substack brother of mine. He on the Chiefs, where he was talking about the great job by Marquez Valdez-Scantling in this game. He had 6 catches, 8 targets, 116 yards. Marcus Kemp, one target, 1 catch, 13 yards. Sky Moore still stinks. 7 targets, only 13 total yards there. But these other guys who are coming in, especially MVS, I think for Mahomes, and he talked about this a little bit in an interview that I played where he was on the Kelsey Brothers podcast, and he talked about how much he doesn't like completion percentage that much as a QB stat. He thinks it's relied upon a little bit too much because he likes to say, I want to be able to give my guys opportunities to make plays. And I think maybe that's a big part of it. A big part of it is you talk about maybe on the opposite side of the spectrum, like Aaron Rodgers, when he had Jordy Nelson went down with an ACL injury back in 2015. He had this really off season after that. And he doesn't have confidence in a lot of these guys. And he's just spamming Devontae Adams the ball when he's there and not getting it necessarily anyone else. I feel like Mahomes really does allow receivers to bring out their best because he's treating them like if they're open, he's going to throw them the ball, or if they're the best option, he's going to throw them the ball. He's not going to assume the worst or be reticent to do something like that. And that's a big advantage when it comes to team building, I think, too, because then you don't have to have that box checked in ink for wide receiver 1 if you have a quarterback who can use and, maximize those other options.
100%. The difference is they catch the ball for him. A lot of quarterbacks throw it to,
but maybe it's symbiotic, at least a little bit. Like if you're willing to throw it to them, unless forced to throw it to them in certain circumstances, I do think there's probably somewhat of a rhythm to it. You're right. MVS is he's a dropaholic when it comes to some other stuff, but he goes through good stretches too. So I think there's a little bit to both times.
Every quarterback doesn't have faith; they have trust. Right? Faith is blind, trust is earned. Right? So you have to get that trust in some capacity. I think everyone would like their wide receivers. DeMarcus Robinson hasn't been the same since he left Patrick Mahomes, right? And so it's like they catch his ball, and that sounds so rudimentary and stupid, but like people's catch rate is so much higher with him, and they'll be able to do it because if all those guys drop those balls, he's going to Kelsey every play. Right, he'll find a way. Right, like he can't. And we're all human. A drop doesn't predict another drop. Whatever. He would go. He would find his boy. Right. That's what all quarterbacks do. It's just guys are catching the ball for him, and he is willing at the end of the day to be able to go to other people versus guys that would never want to earn that trust outside of practice. Right. And there are issues with guys throwing the ball in practice and then being like, okay, he dropped it in practice, I'm not going to throw it to him in the game.
Yeah. And I'm trying to think of there was one particular one, that one catch from Marcus Kemp. I can't find when it happened in the drive, but I remember thinking like, it wasn't like he was completely wide open or something. It was actually a play where they really needed it. I can't bring it up now to figure out exactly when it was, but I believe it was actually one where they needed it. Oh, the 2nd and 8 for a 13-yard catch. But again, it was like, at that point, there was no like Justin Watson, who's Justin Watson, but he wasn't there, and he actually kind of matters a little bit. He gets open down the field. He actually gets a decent amount of air yards. He also drops some balls, but Mahomes still throws it to him. So Justin Watson didn't play. Then you had McCole Hardman going out, Juju Smith-Schuster going out, Kadarius Toney, who dropped a touchdown on the first drive, going out. Yeah, so having guys like Marcus Kemp step in and be able to at least do something, I think is just like off the charts as far as we're talking about wide receiver, 6 or 7 at that point.
Yeah, and they're one of the teams that has, be able to find guys like that that'll actually perform. Unbelievable. But every game that Patrick Mahomes has, he's got some guy stepping up. Noah Gray making like a one-handed catch in a playoff game. Like they have a guy step up, and that's great for team camaraderie. This is the football guy side of me is like if you have Patrick Mahomes, as a team we can win any game, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't matter if everyone else falls flat, and so that helps you in terms of how you prepare for the game and how you feel confident going into the game, knowing you have the best player. I played 3 years in college where I had the best player on the field. Right.
Yeah.
I knew that going in. So it changes a team's makeup knowing you have that guy, and guys will step up for that. Patrick Mahomes has earned that. And so now, on Jalen Hurts on the other side, do they follow him that same way? Will everyone step up and play better because of him? I think it's more of a team element there versus then focused on we have the guy. But they did go 98 yards with Chad Henne. So who am I?
Yeah, I mean, that was funny. A guy I like a lot, Jeff Schwartz. He was writing about that. Fellow Schwartz. It was offensive lineman. He was saying how in that Chad Henne drive, how they ran the ball with Isaiah Pacheco on that one. And he's like, the Chiefs should do that more often. I'm like, yeah, well, he did average like 15 yards a carry during that drive. So yeah, I agree. The analytics agree. If you could average 15 yards a carry, you should be running the ball more often.
Yeah, analytics is other than the ability that the clock runs. So in the last 2 minutes doesn't matter. Analytics would love running the ball if it got as many yards as passing the ball.
Oh yeah, definitely. It's like short yardage. That's what we're also calling for a little bit there. What do you think about Jalen Hurts long term? Because there's some good videos that he put out. I don't know if he put out or if his management or someone about the doubters and the haters, and of which there are many for him the first couple of years. Not me, of course. I like the pick, but one of the few. I mean, maybe one of the only who at least publicly like the pick there. But is still anyone really sold on him? I saw a funny thing this morning of someone dunking on someone else who was defending Hurts now, but then a year ago we're saying Gardner Minshew might be a better quarterback. And I don't think that was super crazy that some people were saying something like that. If Minshew would have continued with another good performance this year after that good performance against the Cowboys, who knows what people would have said. But Hurts is up for extension here. So do you think this is signed, sealed, and delivered? Because if you're a buy low type of person, this can't be a good buy low season for Jalen Hurts, even if you do believe in him.
Yeah, so I would extend him as soon as possible, because we don't know what the salary cap is going to look like. We know it went up a lot this year. It's going to go up, $40 million this year, and so you might as well get it in before the YouTube TV deal goes in. So just from a financials perspective, and then worst comes to worst, you trade him for a first round pick later, right? Like they've done before. Or get a couple third-round picks. There's things you can do about moving on from a guy like that, but you want to get that guy, you want to keep him in, and then because of the salary cap going up, I think you stay with him as because you have some of your other key pieces already locked in for a while.
Yeah,
I think evaluating quarterbacks, especially being agnostic of situation that they go into, is really, really hard. Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, and Lamar Jackson all sat for a year. Or wait, no, Josh Allen didn't. But Lamar Jackson.
Lamar Jackson sat for half to 2/3 of the year, maybe.
Yeah. Right, but he sat, and they had brought Greg Roman in because they knew they were going to run the pistol offense, right? With him when they drafted him, and so that's why they had him as the assistant offensive coordinator. But guys got to sit, and then we saw them be successful. If Josh Allen didn't have time, growing pains, right? People were doing high fives about, how everyone predicted he was going to be terrible, and then everyone was high fiving about how right they were, right? And now we know that's not the case.
I feel attacked, but go ahead. Continue.
Yeah. It was you and a couple other people in Cincinnati, and then I mean all of us were it just it didn't fit, and now he ended up getting Zach Wilson drafted because it was this guy doesn't look great, but see how far he throw. Like
wait till Will Levis this season. I mean I don't know anything about him, but I guess he throws a nice ball.
But at least he played in the West Coast and he was recruited. But Will Levis, another thing. So that's my point is these best quarterbacks in the NFL. We have the guys who sat, and then you had they didn't feel confident in them right away, and then you have Kyler Murray, Baker Mayfield, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow, all transferred, right? So big time schools that get them, and then they have big time first overall picks were transfer players, and so they had to change the scenery to go into it. It's really hard to evaluate these guys outside of who's calling the plays, who are they throwing to, what's the scenario, what's the expectations for them. It's a really hard situation to evaluate that quarterback. But if you believe you can build around this and create a winning culture, right, around this player, absolutely do it. But I'm also like you mentioned, I take flyers on second and third round picks to be at quarterbacks because the position's so important. The Eagles saw how important having a backup quarterback was their last Super Bowl run. Doesn't mean that you can't draft quarterbacks anymore because they're still an asset to trade later, even if you want to, because they haven't been played. It's like being able to have something that is unproven. There's not reason why they can't be better than like Trey Lance. I think he's still an asset to be traded this year if another team had him evaluated because he hasn't done anything to prove that he's not a good quarterback yet. Right?
I don't know. That's a little. He's a little iffy. He's a little iffy. He has at least played some, but he hasn't played much. He
played in
true.
a torrential downpour, right? I don't think anyone would have expected that play to be like, oh, this is a vacuum of what this guy is. I know who this guy is right now. And so like that's my point is like I think you extend him. You've built a team. You've built a culture around the guy. And worst comes to worst, you take another flyer in the second, third round to try and if that's not what you want, the route you want to go. Continue moving forward.
Yeah, it's probably going to happen this offseason because as a second round pick, there's also no fifth year option. So the first time you can extend him is this offseason. And if you don't extend him this offseason, then we're already playing the franchise tag game in order to extend him next season. So this will probably happen. One thing I will look out, maybe we're talking a little too much about like the future here, but I do think it's a near impossibility to pay two wide receivers and a quarterback at the same time at a super high level beyond the beginning of their contracts when you have these artificially low cap hits before they step up. I think that's why people are so interested in what's going to happen with T. Higgins for the Bengals, because they're going to have Burrow and Higgins become eligible for extensions this offseason and Chase next season. So if they decide to prioritize Chase versus Higgins, do they look to move Higgins now rather than move him later? You maybe got a similar situation with the Eagles a little bit here, where you have A.J. Brown already on the big deal. You have Jalen Hurts going to get the big deal. And then you have Devontae Smith, where a lot of people have talked about this. If you exclude the first game of the season, which of course, you never say this is kind of cheating, but where A.J. Brown went completely ham and had like 14 targets or something like that. Devontae Smith has actually been more productive the entire rest of the season that they've ended up playing there. He's younger, things like that. I don't know. I mean, I guess I wouldn't be surprised if they extend Hurts now and maybe a season or two from now, they still extend Smith, but then maybe even trade out A.J. Brown at some point once they get that cap hit down. I do think something will have to be done there, and I'm interested to see how Howie's going to approach it. Because you can't pay all three of those guys, I think, at the same time, along with Dallas Goedert. But luckily, tight ends are pretty cheap.
Yeah, I think that's where you just have to keep hitting in the draft, right?
Yeah, or keep taking shots.
Right.
Don't assume you have those positions filled. Also, that's another problem, I think, when not only quarterback, but even a wide receiver. You don't say we have A.J. Brown and we have Devontae Smith, so we're not going to draft any wide receivers in the first two rounds for the next 2 years, because if you hit on one, first of all, you need three receivers a lot in the NFL. It doesn't hurt to have three good receivers, number one. Number two, if you hit on one of those guys, all of a sudden a world of possibilities opens up as far as what you can do and potentially trade your other guys, more so than hitting on a position that's not important. If you hit on a position of need that's not as important, it doesn't open up all the possibilities to really improve your team.
I think where they got really lucky, and this is not wide receiver, is Jordan Mailata. Right?
Yeah.
He's on their roster because of the International Players Program that lets you have 4 extra players on a rotating which division you are. And that year, he got to be there. 20 years old, played football for 1 year, but he's a physical freak. And I remember watching the film, and there was a guy I wanted to get at the XFL, and it's like, this guy's going to be an all-pro. And I still believe that Jordan Mailata has the chance to be an all-pro. He's one of the most fluid athletes we have in the NFL, and he is on a very small contract, very similar to when Alejandro Villanueva was on the Steelers. A guy who came in through the practice squad, took a smaller contract that his position would have, and played at a higher level than other people. And so their ability to have that premier position on a contract that is not at a premier level is extremely valuable for them to be able to manipulate other areas of need, right? And then if they can continue as a coaching or as a general management as a coaching staff to identify players that are not being used wisely other places and maximize their abilities then on the field, like Hassan Reddick, it's one of those things that will continue to make the Eagles team flourish in years to come, no matter what comes in their way, because I believe analytics is a large part of how they are developing their talent. I know from my research, it's ownership that is driving analytics usage into how they're building their roster. And that's a big piece of what they do to then build out those spaces. So whether they have new problems or not, I believe using analytics will find a way to then find holes in the markets elsewhere that they can then develop.
Okay, well, let's talk a little bit about the two teams that were eliminated, because I think I mentioned a bit about the T. Higgins decision. We'll see. He again is a second-round pick, so they don't have the luxury necessarily of saying he's going to play through onto the fifth-year option, and we'll figure it out. Like they can do much longer timeline for Jamar Chase having been drafted a year later, also. But there's a very different situation. You have the Bengals who have all these players offensively, but then you're going to say offensive line, maybe tight end, defense, lots of things you can pick out there. And then the 49ers who have maybe everything but the quarterback figured out there. Presumably it's going to be Trey Lance and then Brock Purdy eventually coming back from injury as the backup, but that's an interesting situation. And they have no picks there too. I'm first to start with the Bengals, how they should approach this offseason, because I'm seeing a lot of, I think they are potentially could fall into a trap of, we got to the conference championship. Our offensive line wasn't good enough to get it done. Maybe our defense wasn't good enough to stop Mahomes, hampered Mahomes. So like, let's do this thing, the opposite of what we we're just talking about, as far as maybe having duplication of high level positions. Let's do the opposite and let's like fill those boxes. Let's get the tight end we need. Let's get the guard or that we may need for an extra player. No offense to interior offensive linemen. Let's get the other player that the linebackers that we need, something like that, which is maybe it is maximizing their 2023 chances, but I don't think it gives them nearly the optionality that they can have if they hit on another premium position instead.
Yeah, if I were them, I'd approach it from a best pick available.
Yeah, everyone says that though, but then nobody, not a lot of people do that.
Yeah, and why I say that for them specifically is they got injury bug at the worst time of the year. I think if they had it for the first 3 games where they were struggling to find their rhythm, and then La'el Collins and Alex Kappa play, right? Everyone plays in the AFC Championship game. I think they're fine. At the end of the day, they were letting everything go. So the screenshot warriors looking at holding calls on the last drive for the Chiefs. Like,
oh yeah, I would try to ignore that. I have to remind myself, Twitter is not real life. These are not all the Bengals fans here. These are just the most
Bengals
psychotic
fans do not watch when your team was on offense, because it was a melee in the backfield. That they were letting everything go, and so they had to have some sort of don't be a screenshot warrior, listeners. But the big issue on top of that is they just got hurt. And I don't think that unless you just invest in your health and safety and things, there are freak accidents going to get there. But I think what they need is just another playmaker on the field. And so I would go after getting more defensive backs, getting interior pass rush, right? They have great run stop in the interior, get interior pass rush. And then also, why not keep going after pass catchers? Yeah. And so the other thing is like, just keep getting pass catchers, and you'll be fine, because someone's getting hurt. This is a long season now. You want as many options for your quarterback, because not everyone's going to be able to make Marcus Kemp a superstar. And so get as many pass catches as possible. I think that way you'll be able to focus. So I said saying I'll do a lot of different things, but if there's a guy that stands out to you as a person that can change your team right now, don't pass them up because there's not like a clear blaring hole for somebody.
Yeah, I mean, so at wide receiver, I mean, I really think they should be looking at wide receiver. Like, why not? I mean, Tyler Boyd they can save about $9 million on the cap if they cut him. If they take a wide receiver early and he ends up hitting, you're sitting here with T. Higgins, who is probably worth a first-round pick, maybe? Like, probably, easily, I would say. A first-round pick, maybe not that much more. I guess A.J. Brown was a first-round pick and change. So you're sitting around with a player who you can trade out for a first-round pick and not have to pay him $25 million a year. Like, what could benefit your team more than that in reality is if you hit on a wide receiver. You save $10 million in cap, you bring in another player, and you then trade out T. Higgins and replenish that first round pick and don't have to pay $25 million a year.
Completely agree. Not much podcasting to do on that one.
Okay, so we solved you, Bengals. I know no one is going to be mock drafting them a wide receiver, but why the hell not? And what I also thought was funny about the offensive line for the Bengals, I had never seen a swing in sentiment that went from being overconfident in two different directions here. Going into the Bills game, I remember saying I thought the Bengals were a little bit undervalued in the markets, but the injury concerns were probably a big deal. And, I had people yelling at me. I had some guy be like, yeah, it hurts when you have a CFL level offensive line. And then he was fine the entire time. There's overplay that. And then the next week, people were like, oh, it doesn't matter that they're still injured, whether these guys are coming back or not, because they did so well the week before. And it's like, yeah, we have to have our base rate for what we assume is going to happen and work off of that, not just swing for recency bias from what happened the last game back and forth. I thought that was an interesting case study, at least.
Yeah, I mean, and also sometimes your plays work and sometimes they don't.
Yeah,
we know how big drops are, or guy making a miss. Rush yards over expected. Like when guys can make big plays, some IGP run going off, right? Like if your good players play a bad off, I'm an offensive lineman. I know what our position is, right? You only get noticed. This is cliche. You only get noticed when it's really bad. But at the end of the day, I can't get the ball and break 3 tackles. Right? A running back, a wide receiver can. And that's why they have more value than an offensive lineman. Yes, a very bad offensive lineman doesn't even let you get started. Okay? Yeah. Completely agree. But at the end of the day, I can't break 4 tackles. I can only block 1 person. Right? Yeah. If you break 4 tackles, you've now blocked 4 people. And so if your good players make plays, you don't get noticed. Right? Or if you're getting away with murder in the backfield, right? And you're just holding on for dear life, you can get away with a lot of stuff, and they weren't able to do that. Their playmakers weren't as making many plays, right?
Yeah.
But the T. Higgins catch over 2 guys on 4th down, and then the 4th down conversion, yeah. Right? We don't look at the offensive lineman on those plays. They're probably getting beat those plays too.
Yeah. It was a pretty quick pass. I do think it's interesting with the offensive lineman thing. It's you're kind of have 5 different, let's say, 6-sided dies, and depending upon how bad the offensive lineman is, there's maybe more sides where one of them is giving up. I mean, how good they are. There's more sides. One of them giving up pressure, and you're kind of just rolling them all at the same time. And when you hit that one time where 3 of them all come up with giving up pressure at the same time, then you can't overcome it. The quarterback can't overcome it. Whoever can't overcome it. But you could have those same dice and rolling it for 20 times in a row and not hit that sometimes. And it doesn't mean that the players are any better or any worse for that amount of time.
It's where a great coordinator comes in, because moving the pocket, right? Anytime you see a backup quarterback come in, maybe the first play of the game, first pass of a game is going to be a bootleg, because they don't have to be blocked for on that play, right? You get the whole defense moving. You're going around the other way. Some teams still like to run it to an overhang, an unblocked edge, and we saw the Eagles or the Niners do that. It's you're the greatest coordinator in the world. I can't stop singing your praises. Then you run bootleg to an overhang player. I think there's a lot of different mindsets on how teams can kind of build around the offensive line. And if you're focusing on, all right, we don't have to pay across the board. Let's draft well, right? And that's what everyone's plan is. But like, let's be conscious of how we're drafting the offensive line. Make sure they'll gel together. But then you have to run plays that can put them in positions to win. And that's the problem that a lot of teams get is they're going to run, oh, he couldn't fit my system. Fellas, your players are your system, right? Run plays are going to – I think what was great is I think the completion percentage record was broken by Sam Bradford when he was in Minnesota. Not because he had a great offensive line and great receivers, but because he got the ball out faster than anyone had gotten the ball out. Because they weren't attempting to block deep pass plays, right? Just get the ball out and keep him safe. So they were still a bad quarterback, but they kept him safe. They called plays specifically to him, and that's what these coaches need to do. If your offensive line can't block for certain plays, don't put them in those positions. Find a way to get Chris Jones not to be one-on-one with somebody, please.
Yeah. That's key. And then I think for the 49ers, I'm actually a little bit more positive on their situation. I know they don't have like the quarterback necessarily figured out. I think they should continue to take shots at the quarterback. And I know you've already invested 3 first-round picks in Trey Lance, so maybe you don't want to do it. They don't have a pick until the 3rd round this year. But it's absolutely wild. They're going to be like the new poster child for compensatory picks because they have 3 third-round compensatory picks this year, a 5th round, a 6th round, a 7th round. Rand Carthon left to go to be the general manager of the Titans, which is going to net them 2 more 3rd round compensatory picks over the next 2 years. DeMeco Ryans left to go be now the head coach of the Titans, the Texans, which is going to net them 2 more 3rd round compensatory picks. I mean, you're almost making up for having just, completely lit on fire those 3rd round picks, even if Lance doesn't hit, as long as you're willing to not play the sunk cost game there and still look at quarterbacks in a prudent manner going forward.
And they might upgrade at defensive coordinator with Vic Fangio now, thinking he might go to San Francisco.
Oh, shots fired at DeMeco Ryans now.
I think he's the best. I think he created the NFL that we see with the scoring being lower.
Yeah,
he's the one who developed all this. Did I play for him? Yes, he's a friend of mine. Yes, but I think he's the best coach, the best defensive coach I've ever seen. So, and so they might get a pick for that. I think. Then I agree with you. The quarterback position is so important, and a lot of the backups play. At the XFL, I built our number 1 paid player on every team was going to be the quarterback. The backup quarterback was going to be the number 2 highest paid player, right? But there was no draft, really capital. There was no salary cap. And so there's a lot of other things that didn't have to gel into, but the focus was who knows if we're going to be able to block for these guys for 10 games. The same things in the NFL, right? The quarterbacks, I don't know. We had, I think the most quarterbacks play this year. You don't know who's going to be there, and so you might as well have those guys in your roster. And I believe by having a guy not play behind another guy who's playing well, their value doesn't decrease an exponential amount. You can still move that.
Yeah, I really don't
move that player. So if your team's good enough to win with Brock Purdy, then you can keep drafting guys like that and then have a piece that you can then move later. No one's saying every player you draft has to be on your team forever.
Yeah. And also, go ahead.
It can be an asset that you move later as well, but you've taken a quarterback that's unproven. People will then try that if they've had good draft grades. That's how we've seen Josh Rosen get picked up by so many teams because in some level a GM had a high grade on him, so you might as well take a flyer on him.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah. Carson Wentz going multiple times. It's happened before with other guys. And I also think the idea, and this might be something that people will say, the idea that if you have Shanahan, it makes the quarterback less important because he can get good play out of bad quarterbacks. I actually think that's probably in a way backwards. I think if you're a coordinator who can get average-ish sort of play out of anyone, then the additional benefit you get from having a better quarterback, let's think of Matt Ryan 2016, like MVP, taking that quarterback to an MVP sort of level. That's more valuable. Like each win that you get above a 500 team is much more valuable of a win in value you're adding than going from 3 wins to 4 wins or 4 wins to 5 wins or 5 wins to 6 wins. Same thing with quarterback. Each, 10th of a point of EPA, each 0.05 of a point of EPA that you're getting efficiency, once you're getting above average is that much more important. That's what differentiates the top guys from the other guys. So if anything, I think you can argue that it's like the best place to invest money with Shanahan, because to get that outsized extra incremental efficiency at the top can really put you forward, because that like Falcons team in 2016, their defense stunk. And they still made it all the way to the Super Bowl. Whereas this 49ers team has been more of a defensive team that's gotten away with not having that quality quarterback.
So it's something the analytics community said earlier this year that kind of bothered me is, or it went from, hey, you just need to start quarterback and they'll make a lot of players better. And then Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle play so well for the Dolphins. And it's, hey, you need good players too for your quarterback, and then your quarterback will play well. Yeah. And what bothers me about that is you're going to then, if I'm have to, our job as analytics people is to go explain to the hardcore football or the football guys, like, hey, here's why analytics is helping you. You go to them and say, you need a really good quarterback, and you need really good wide receivers, and you need really good blockers, and then you'll have a good offense.
Yeah, it's like, boom, simple.
You're not finding a gap. You're not finding an edge. There's no edge there created. My thing about the Niners is they can't protect the quarterback. They get hurt a quarterback every time.
How much of that is randomness, though, versus like, are they doing something? Are they doing something with the quarterback?
They got to
putting him in more harm.
They got to start praying. They're not. They got to start praying to more people or to different people. Like, I don't know.
I think that's a lot of the reason why they traded up for Lance, honestly, is because Jimmy was getting hurt and the bottom was falling out in those situations.
I would feel, if I were them, I would say to myself, we can clearly build around an average quarterback, and we can take them to B+ level and get to the game. All we have to do is win the game at this point, right? But they can absolutely get to the game, the NFC Championship game, to get to the Super Bowl with an offense built around a game execution, not manager, game execution quarterback. I think that they should keep taking chances on those players in the second and third round versus paying a guy, because then they can pay those guys at those key positions and keep paying a defense to then have the opportunity to be put in those positions. They have a unique act. Like, what's their edge? Their edge is they can get to the game. I agree. It's better to have Patrick Mahomes on your team than not. It's better to have Josh Allen on your team than not. But they don't need those guys to get to the NFC Championship game. I would continue to try and say we can use so much capital elsewhere and have those great players to elevate a player versus, because, Brock Purdy isn't doing this, if with Kyle Shanahan, if he doesn't have Deebo Samuel, Christian McCaffrey, Brandon Ayuk, and George Kittle, right? George Kittle is the best EPA per target player this year in the NFL. Like, they're creating a lot from those also key players, where if they have to invest in the quarterback position on a max contract, those guys all aren't there. They can have an advantage because of the coordinator, so I would use that advantage. You're 100% right. I think they'd elevate with on offense with the star quarterback, but I don't know if they need to based on how they build their defense.
Yeah. I mean, it's weird. It's just like everything's like the last game that happened. The last game that happens with the Bills, they have trouble offensively. So it went from, an elite quarterback like Josh Allen can elevate anyone to, how do you expect Josh Allen to win when he doesn't have enough receivers? So yeah, I
didn't like the receiver talk. Isn't Gabriel Davis a great number 2 in this league?
I don't know if he's that good, but whatever. I don't know. He can be good. He can be good. So, but I guess when you have Cole Beasley out there again running routes, maybe people aren't happy about that. Although second team All Pro Cole Beasley, thanks to Peter King a couple of years ago. But here, I guess the overarching thing, and this is maybe what we talked about earlier, and this is going to even go for the 49ers here, is like quarterback number 1. Like if you hit and you have that guy and you're certain of that, you can legitimately say, I'm not going to draft this position anymore, which is a position that you really need to be investing capital in all times until you have that. Other than that, I would actually say maybe tight end is second. Like if you have George Kittle, I'm fine just saying we're done at tight end and we're going to pay George Kittle a lot of money, and rather than going back into the draft on your Kittle. But other than that, all bets are off. If you want to draft more receivers and say you're going to let Deebo Samuel go, or you're going to trade him, you're going to do whatever, I feel like that's how you have to approach it for these teams.
It's funny you say that, because they also don't have to pay a second tight end, because a lot of teams, because they pay the fullback, and he's the highest paid fullback, but he operates. It's less than having to pay a second tight end good money. right?
Yeah. I mean, tight ends are just cheap because the franchise tag keeps it. The franchise tag is calculated based upon the top 5 at the position. So we talk about the top 5 tight ends versus the top 5 wide receivers, where there's 3 of them on the field at one particular time. The tight ends just get screwed by that calculation.
That's why Jordan Cameron changed his Twitter bio to pass catcher, right? Because that's how Jimmy Graham tried to
Jimmy Graham tried. He failed, but he tried. Yeah, he's tried that. Gesicki, I think, was trying that. Everyone's trying to do that. So
yeah, I think you got to talk to D Smith before you change your bio. I think what they have advantages is they don't play with 3 wide receivers on the field all the time, right? So they don't have to have like the Rams, the Bengals, the Cowboys, or Kellen Moore, now the Chargers. They have 3 wide receivers on the field every single play, and so they need to have 3 good ones. They don't need to have 3 good ones at expensive positions. And if they want to keep going after fullbacks and they only need a fullback and a tight end, I was a little apprehensive to the Christian McCaffrey trade because we saw what every Shanahan has done with random running backs. But he really did add an element to their game this year, to their team, that made it so that other teams had to focus there and were able to do things, him out of the backfield, changing how defense play with Debo goes back into the backfield. So there were things that he did. So they can invest in unique positions because of who they have calling plays, and they can find market inefficiencies that way. To where they can maximize their value there. You still need to hit in the draft. I think I've done my football guy moment of the day by saying just hit in the draft. But if they continue to kind of do that, they don't have to invest the same way other teams now have to in the 11 personnel NFL.
Yeah, and with those comp picks, they've almost accidentally played the trade down game by having like all these different mid-round picks and all these different darts to potentially hit on. Kind of accidentally traded in their first round and second round picks for later picks. But instead of it wasn't trading in, it was using those to get other players.
Yeah, that's actually the key element is, should you have bad coaches get jobs elsewhere? So just keep everything on yourself as the head coach. You be so good as a coordinator that you can keep getting your people hired elsewhere so you can get comp picks. And then it doesn't matter. That's actually the real market inefficiency.
Yeah. Well, we'll see how these coaches do. I hope things will go well for D'Amico Rams. But like you said, if they bring in Fangio, that's not going to be bad for them. All right. Anything else you want to plug, talk about before I let you out of here?
No, I think the podcast is great. I think the Unexpected Points community, follow that Substack. From Prime Vision, we'll be back next year. If you have any suggestions on things you want to see, things you didn't like, things that you want to see more of, hit me up at PV Sports Stats or at Schwartzstein S on Twitter. My DMs are open, and just kind of say anything that you want to know more or want to see more of next year. We're going through the process of building, and we're excited about what you guys will have next year.
We need some more of those zip ups that you got going on there. With the brain on top of TNF there. Looking good, man. Well, great to talk to you as usual. One of the best guys out there, Sam. Go follow him. I'll give everyone have the details at the front end of this episode. But thanks so much for the time, man.
Meet up at the Combine.
Yes, let's do it.
All right. See ya.
Later.